You're listening to this story, but have you noticed that certain tales have the power to attract what lurks? Some people who ignored this warning have claimed to see headlights in their rearview mirror when there was no car there, or felt a strange chill while driving at night. If you don't want to take that risk, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Maybe that will be enough to keep them away. Now let's continue. The Midnight Passenger. It was a cold, silent dawn when Eduardo, a rideshare driver, decided to take one last fare for the night. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:47 a.m. when the notification for a new trip popped up on his phone. The pickup location was a secondary road on the outskirts of town, a sparsely traveled stretch surrounded by tall, twisted trees. He hesitated for a moment, but since the night had been slow, he decided to accept the call. The final destination indicated a central area, so it would be a good way to end his shift. As he approached the pickup point, Eduardo noticed that there were no houses or buildings nearby, only darkness and the deserted road. He parked the car and waited. He glanced in the rearview mirror and felt a chill as he noticed a silhouette standing by the side of the road. It was a woman wearing a long, dark coat, with her hair falling over her face, hiding her features. She walked slowly to the car and got into the back seat without saying a word. "Good evening," Eduardo said, trying to break the silence. The passenger remained still, staring straight ahead. Her scent was strange, a mixture of wet earth and something he couldn't identify. He started the car and began the journey. The atmosphere inside the vehicle was heavy, and the woman's silence made Eduardo uneasy. Through the rearview mirror, he tried to peek at her face, but her hair still covered most of it. The first strange thing happened when he looked again at the rearview mirror and realized that the passenger seemed different. Her face was too pale, and her eyes were disturbingly empty. A shiver ran down his spine, and he looked away, focusing on the road. A few minutes later, the car radio started to crackle. The station changed on its own to a frequency full of static, and amidst the noise, Eduardo could have sworn he heard a voice whispering his name. His heart raced, and he quickly turned off the radio. It was then that he heard a whisper coming from the back seat. "Don't look at me." The voice was faint, but it carried something sinister. Eduardo felt a deep chill and tried to keep his eyes fixed on the road. His instincts screamed at him not to look, but the curiosity was unbearable. Slowly, he turned his head to the rearview mirror. What he saw made his blood run cold. The woman's face was deformed, as if her skin was sinking. Her eyes were black, lifeless pits, and her mouth moved without emitting any sound. Eduardo screamed and jerked the steering wheel sharply, nearly running off the road. When he managed to regain control of the car, he looked again in the rearview mirror, and the woman was no longer there. The back seat was empty. Eduardo stopped the car on the shoulder, sweating and with his breathing accelerated. He got out of the vehicle and looked around. There was no sign of anyone. Confused and terrified, he decided to close the app and go home immediately. The next day, still trying to understand what had happened, he researched that road. What he discovered made his stomach turn. Years ago, a young woman had died in an accident exactly at that location. Witnesses said that she was trying to hitchhike when she was hit by a driver who was never identified. Since then, reports of a phantom passenger have been frequent in that region. Drivers said they picked up a pale woman dressed in black who mysteriously disappeared in the middle of the journey. Eduardo never drove on that road again and, to this day, avoids taking fares during dawn. But from time to time, when he is alone in the car, he smells a strange smell of wet earth and hears a faint whisper coming from the back seat. "Don't look at me." Headlights in the rearview mirror, but no car behind. Carlos had been a truck driver for over 15 years. Accustomed to long trips and lonely dawn, he wasn't easily impressed. But that night, something on the road felt different. The silence was heavy, and the fog crawled along the asphalt like skeletal fingers trying to grab the tires of his truck. It was around 3 a.m. when he noticed the headlights in the rearview mirror. Two bright dots, distant but constant. On a deserted road like that, it was rare to see another vehicle at that hour. Initially, he didn't pay attention and continued driving. Minutes later, he looked again. The headlights were still there, exactly at the same distance. Carlos frowned. Any other car would have approached or fallen behind. He stepped on the accelerator, hoping to open the distance, but the headlights remained firm, keeping up with his speed like a patient predator. The tension began to grow. He flashed the high beams twice, a common code among truckers to indicate passage or confirm that they were being seen. No response. Curious and somewhat uncomfortable, he swerved the truck to the right lane and reduced his speed, waiting for the other vehicle to overtake him. But nothing happened. The headlights remained still, reflected in the rearview mirror, without approaching, without disappearing. It was then that he realized something scary. There was no engine sound, no tire noise, nothing but the oppressive silence of the road. Carlos's heart raced. He picked up the radio and tried to call any other trucker who was listening. "Anyone listening? There's a strange car following me on Route 66. It's giving me a bad feeling." Silence. Just a faint static on the frequency. The road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. He tried to look away from the rearview mirror, but a morbid curiosity made him look again. It was then that he noticed something that chilled his blood. The headlights were higher than before, as if the vehicle had risen off the ground. A shiver ran down his spine. He blinked a few times, trying to find a rational explanation, but the headlights were now hovering, as if the vehicle was floating in the air. His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. The truck began to shake slightly, and he realized that his speed had decreased without him noticing. It was then that the radio static stopped abruptly, replaced by a faint, distorted voice. "Don't look back." Carlos felt the blood drain from his face. He instinctively looked at the side mirror. There was no road. There was nothing. Just total darkness, as if the world behind him had been swallowed by the void. Desperate, he accelerated the truck as much as he could. The engine roared loudly, the cabin shook, and the speedometer needle went up. But the headlights didn't disappear. They were still there, shining brightly in the rearview mirror, now closer, as if something was about to catch him. Then, out of nowhere, everything went dark. The truck skidded for a moment, and Carlos felt his body being thrown forward. When he opened his eyes, he was parked on the shoulder. The engine was still running, but there were no more headlights behind him. There was no other car. The road was empty. With trembling hands, he picked up his cell phone to check the time. 3 a.m. The same time as before. Carlos never drove alone on that road again, but to this day, whenever he looks in the rearview mirror late at night, he feels a chill and prays to never see those headlights that don't belong to any car again. The Dead Man's Curve. The winding road cut through a dense forest, illuminated only by the car's headlights and the pale moonlight that filtered through the twisted branches. Pedro and his friends were returning from a trip to the countryside when they decided to face the famous Dead Man's Curve, an isolated stretch of road where, according to legends, numerous accidents had occurred. Some drivers said they saw silhouettes by the side of the road. Others swore that their cars lost control without explanation. Laughing at the stories, Pedro accelerated as he approached the curve. The radio crackled softly, playing a song that seemed even more distorted by the gloomy atmosphere. The friends joked about ghosts and spirits, but deep down, everyone was alert. The silence inside the car was almost as oppressive as the darkness outside. It was then that Mariana, sitting in the back seat, let out a stifled scream. "There's someone on the road!" Pedro slammed on the brakes, causing the tires to skid on the damp asphalt. The car stopped a few feet from a motionless figure in the middle of the road. It was a woman in a white dress, long hair covering part of her pale face. Her dark eyes reflected the headlights, and her body seemed to tremble slightly. "My God," Rafael murmured beside Pedro. "Is she hurt?" Pedro tried to put the car in reverse, but for some reason the car stalled. The dashboard flashed, the interior lights went out, and the radio started to emit a loud, distressing static. Panic set in. The woman began to walk towards the car. Her movements were erratic, as if her body was not completely under control. When she got close enough, her features became more visible. Her skin was grey, her eyes were empty holes, and her mouth seemed to move, although no sound came out. Pedro tried to start the car again, but the engine only growled in vain. The woman was now next to Mariana's window, who was crying softly, huddled in her seat. It was then that everyone heard a whisper coming from nowhere. "Get off the road!" The radio turned off abruptly. The car started again on its own. Without thinking twice, Pedro accelerated, swerving around the figure. When he looked in the rearview mirror, she had disappeared. They drove in absolute silence until they reached the city. When they finally stopped the car, they realized something that took their breath away. On the dusty rear window, a handprint was engraved, as if someone had tried to get into the car. The next morning, when they told what happened, a local man just shook his head and said, "You were lucky. Some who saw the woman on the curve never reached their destination, the road that disappears from the map." Jonas was an experienced traveler, used to taking unknown roads to explore new places. That night, he was driving alone on a deserted highway, trying to find a shortcut to avoid a long, congested stretch. The GPS indicated an alternative road, a narrow, unnamed route that cut through a dense forest. He hesitated for a moment, but decided to follow it. The asphalt seemed old, cracked, as if no one had passed there for a long time. With each kilometer traveled, the silence around became heavier, and the darkness seemed to swallow the car's headlights. The radio crackled and suddenly turned off on its own. The cell phone signal disappeared. After driving for more than an hour, Jonas realized something strange. He wasn't getting anywhere. The road, which according to the GPS should only take a few minutes, seemed endless. The trees around were identical, and no curve led anywhere. He started to sweat. He tried to turn around, but after driving for a few more minutes in the opposite direction, he realized that he was back at the same point. It was then that he saw something that made his heart race. On the shoulder, a woman dressed in white was standing, motionless, looking directly at him. Her face was pale, and her eyes were bottomless black pits. Jonas stepped on the accelerator, but no matter how much he drove, she remained there, always at the same distance, always staring at him. Fear took over his body. He screamed, tried to blink, looked away. But when he looked back at the road, he realized that there was no more sign of her. Instead, a figure appeared sitting in the passenger seat. The smell of wet earth invaded the car. A faint, icy voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The car began to shake violently. Jonas stepped on the brakes and ran out of the vehicle. He looked around, desperate. The road was different. The asphalt now looked new, without cracks. The GPS indicated that he was in a place where no road should exist. The next day, already at home, he researched that region. He found an old report about an abandoned road condemned decades ago due to unexplained accidents and disappearances. But the most disturbing detail, the victims always described the same woman in white. Since that night, Jonas has never used shortcuts again, and every time he thinks about that route, he still feels the presence of something watching him from the darkness. The shortcut that shouldn't be taken. It was almost 3 in the morning when Larissa decided to cut through a secondary road. The main route was congested due to unexpected construction, and the GPS suggested a shortcut that passed through a rural area. Without thinking much, she accepted the route. The road was narrow and surrounded by tall trees, whose twisted shadows danced under the car's headlights. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. There were no streetlights, no houses, no sign of life. The only sound was the roar of the engine and the rustling of the wind in the leaves. After a few kilometers, Larissa noticed something strange. The signs on the side of the road seemed out of place, turned in impossible directions. With each curve, she had the feeling of driving in circles. The GPS started acting strangely, its electronic voice failing and repeating the same instructions. Turn right, turn right. But there were no more intersections. It was then that she saw the first silhouette, a figure standing on the shoulder, motionless. At first it looked like a man in dark clothes, but as the headlights illuminated him, Larissa realized that he had no face, just an empty space, a dense shadow in the place where the eyes and mouth should be. She held her breath and accelerated, feeling the cold sweat run down her neck. The car radio turned on its own, emitting static interspersed with incomprehensible whispers. The fear grew like an unbearable weight in her chest. Minutes later, another curve, and there was the silhouette again. This time closer, this time accompanied by others. Larissa tried to turn around, but when she looked in the rearview mirror, she saw something that made her heart stop. The road behind her no longer existed. Only a dense, oppressive fog occupied the space where the way back should be, as if the world was closing in around her. It was when the voice on the radio finally became understandable. It was low, slurred, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "You took the wrong way." The car stalled. The headlights went out. Larissa was in total darkness, the silence so deep that she could hear her own panting breath. Then footsteps, approaching. The next day, a farmer found Larissa's car abandoned in the middle of the field. The engine was intact, the tank full, but there was no sign of her. The police investigated, but found no clues. The road, according to old maps, had been closed for more than 20 years. Since then, drivers who pass through that region report seeing a silhouette by the side of the road, a woman trying to find her way back.